Well, welcome back everybody to a new school year. We have a new exciting year ahead of us. We are, remember, trying to go into that building to become better at maybe not all, but almost all of your intellectual pursuits. You should have some things outside of school that are important to you. You should have hobbies. You should have a physical hobby. Do you like a certain sport? Do you like to do something that is taking a lot of your physical energy, right? You should have a physical hobby. You should have an intellectual hobby. Maybe it's certain types of literature. Maybe it's some other kind of reading or writing that you don't get when you're in the school building. And you should also have a spiritual hobby. I think that's important. Something you believe in, care about. Could be religion, could be faith, could be Aristotelian logic. It could be the art of, various things that are not necessarily the fine arts in terms of reasoning and coming up with arguments, right? There are people who study this stuff just on their own. They don't take it in school. But I'd like to begin the year with a reaction to a Facebook post I put up, and it was Judge Napolitano talking to someone on Fox. I think it was Fox Red Eye. I'm not sure, but it was about a 5-minute long clip. And I put it up there for seniors who are in my presentational speaking class because Napolitano is talking about the Civil War, and he's talking about reasons for it. And he's not giving you the standard boilerplate response of the textbook that says the evil racists in the South needed to be beaten and the slaves needed to be freed, and that's why there was a civil war. That's what the corporate textbooks tell you, those textbooks that everybody yells at. Oh, the textbooks come from Texas. It's a big corporation. They make so much money on them, and people disparage, particularly people on the left, and they have a point. They have a very good point. These books are not equitable in their approach. They're not unbiased, and people rip up the textbooks and malign them 6 ways to Sunday, except when those textbooks talk about the Civil War. I guess because that's what happened in this Facebook post. People, long-winded responses with things that weren't really arguments. That Napolitano is using racist language that's kind of a cover for conservatives and Republicans. And he brings up things like states' rights and tariffs and imposts that are kind of coded language that conservatives and Republicans and establishment whites use to kind of avoid the racism and the slavery issue. Which, first of all, calling someone a name isn't an argument. I get called lots of things. You can only imagine, and those of you with unorthodox opinions know exactly what I mean. You get called all kinds of stuff. The nicest thing I get called is a conspiracy theorist. I kind of like that one. But you have these quasi-arguments thrown out there, yet the post that I put up there was, hey, seniors, I'm going to help you learn how to present an argument verbally in front of people using logos, using logic. And none of that really got addressed. One guy brought it up and said, yeah, there's things that he talks about that are legit. But the rest of it was a lot of anger at Judge Napolitano and how he is, it's just a lot of insinuation that he's some kind of a racist, or the current buzzword. Now it's 2017. I wonder what it'll be a year from now. White supremacist, right? So the hard thing to believe was that these were put out as arguments. The other thing is, because it's not an argument, right? Calling someone a name is not an argument. Saying that it's cover for racism. Well, until someone says to you, I'm a racist, or their actions prove it, and there seems to be some of that out there now, especially The weirdos have gotten out of their basement and are walking around the streets of the United States. But you have something like, I thought it would be kind of a harmless post, because in Abraham Lincoln's inaugural speech in April of 1861, the Civil War had already started. South Carolina had already broken away. Fort Sumter had already been fired upon. He says it is going to continue, but he says it in his own way, that the federal government will continue to, I was going to say protect, but that's the wrong word, will continue to collect duties and imposts that are due it. And in those days, if you know your history, there was no income tax, and there was no Federal Reserve. You didn't print money. Gold and silver were money. So there was a finite amount of it, which is why it was so valuable and why the economy was much more robust than it is now. You couldn't just print up money out of debt, Federal Reserve. You had to actually earn it. So the federal government got its money from, wait for it, duties and imposts. And Lincoln said this in his speech. We will go down there and we will continue doing what we do. You're not going to get our money. And where were the big ports? There were 2 or 3 in the north. You had Philadelphia, you had New York and Boston. Everything else was in the south. Huge amount of duties and imposts coming in New Orleans, right? In the Carolinas, Charlotte. You have huge coast of North and South Carolina and Georgia. You have lots of duties and imposed tariffs, the funding, the lifeblood of the federal government at that time coming in. So you have, I think today, a very unhealthy habit by our overlords. They're telling you to defend the establishment. Imagine if I said, I want you to defend the textbook, this corporate monster of biased foolery that are created in Texas. I want you to defend that. You would say, people would tell me, Doug, you've lost it. Freelance teacher, you've lost it. It's over. But that's what people do, right? That now people, if you're, these are not revolutionaries. These are not edgelords. They're defending the establishment. The establishment says you had racist people and the Civil War was there to free the slaves. Now, the South seceded because of slavery. They didn't want the federal government telling them what to do. They said it very clearly in their documents, and they were keeping slavery. You're not going to tell us what to do, and we're keeping it. Right? The 6% of Southern whites who owned slaves, who obviously were very wealthy, slavery was very expensive, and you have them controlling government, naturally, the wealthy, hello, do this. They said, we're keeping it. And Lincoln said, basically, he said, I don't care what you do with slavery. Lincoln actually was a big proponent of sending black people back to Africa, despite what you've been taught in your government mandated government textbook corporate school. And so he said, I don't care about that. What I do care about is collecting that money and keeping the Union together. That's what he was keyed on. And I brought up some of this stuff as well. I brought it up it comes up in Napolitano's interview, and I mentioned it. And, I keep coming back to this with you guys. My legions of fans, you understand this. It's the reaction that you need to analyze. And you'll know if you have ruffled feathers, if you are somewhat of a revolutionary or edgy or different and unique, the vitriol and the reaction will be intense, will be totally intense. And I'll leave you with this last bit, and I want you to try to practice this and watch the reactions to what you do. It wasn't all bad, this Facebook post. And it wasn't, actually none of it was bad. It was just interesting. And, people that I like are always pushing back and insinuating my racial motives, which is ironic if you came to work with me for a day. Let's just put it that way. But the free thinking people, had interesting arguments. They had some agreement, right? They had some points that they quibbled about. But I had someone else on the post as a response say, it would be really, I would love to take your class. It must be very interesting. And that's a great endorsement. It wasn't like, wow, you're always so right. It's amazing how you just get it, right? You're so smart, freelance teacher. No, that wasn't it. it would be interesting to be in your class. And that's the whole point, isn't it? And I want you to keep that in mind for your school year. That you, let's say you have a boring class. Yeah, I know, it's hard to imagine, right? You try to make it interesting. Find one thing a day from that class that you might help you, or you might want to look up later, or look up on your phone, right? You can do this. Get something out of it. And you'll know if you're towing the party line. No one will really care. They'll smile at you. They'll nod their head. Yeah, okay, great. You're so nice. But if you're actually saying something that bucks the establishment, which everyone seems to be defending the establishment these days. If you say something that really bucks the trend and is anti-establishment, you'll get some response, right? It takes no courage at all these days to be against racism. Really? Are you against cancer too? I mean, okay, yeah. 99, I don't know anyone who's for it. Maybe you do, but I don't. 100% of the people I know believe and act in a manner that is against racism. It takes no moral courage to stand up and say, I'm against racism. So that's an easy one. And there are people always virtue signaling about this. So you'll know as a student, and it won't be necessarily on the topic of race. It just comes up all the time now. But on whatever topic it is, if people come after you, you'll know you've hit a nerve. And the chances are it means that you're speaking truth. Sometimes uncomfortable truth that people don't like. So try to work on that. I think that's a good project for all of us this year, right? Speak truth, even the truth that you don't like. Don't just follow what everyone else is thinking. Patton said it very clearly. If everyone is thinking the same thing, then no one is thinking. And that's right. So be the person that is thinking a little bit differently than everybody else, and say what you believe, and say it proudly. This is The Freelance Teacher. I'm Doug Marola, thefreelanceteacher.com, tfttravelgroup.com, and I'll talk to you in a couple days. Have a great year. We'll be together again, and I'll help you every which way I can. Thank you very much.